Have you heard of the goddess who saw to the safety of ancient Egyptian pharaohs? Well, there are several gods in Egyptian mythology, and it's understandable if you don't. Some of the gods are so well known and have gained popularity in pop culture and the public imagination. Gods like Apophis, Ra, Anubis, Isis, Osiris, and the likes have been the most talked about, while some have been relegated to little feature stories. And one such lesser and not so talked about god is Mafdet. So, in today's video, we'll be talking about Mafdet, the powerful being who was entrusted with protecting the pharaohs of Egypt and Ra, king of the gods, her roles, and her fall. Who was Mafdet? Mafdet was a goddess in the ancient Egyptian religion, often depicted in human form with the head of a feline, wearing a crown of snakes. Mafdet is said to be the first of the feline goddesses, predating Based and 𝐤𝐸𝐴𝐷. She was dubbed the feline goddess, whose ferocity conquers snakes and scorpions. Adding to that, she was an early glorification of legal justice in the form of executions, and was believed to make judgments at judgment halls in the underworld, where those who despised the pharaoh were decapitated with her lethal claw. This means that if you are an enemy of the pharaoh after you have been killed, you would be decapitated in the afterlife as well. Mafdet was the goddess that resulted from the Egyptians noticing that cats generally would drop dead animals at people's feet. And since Mafdet deposited the heart of wrongdoers at the feet of the pharaoh, hearts that she'd ripped out herself, the people surmised that she was the goddess of them all. However, her most important task was to protect the king, his chambers, and other sacred places against venomous animals, which were deemed as oppositions to truth, balance, order, morality, and all things good. According to the pyramid texts of the Old Kingdom, the First Egyptian Dynasty, she was the protector of the sun god, Ra, from venomous snakes. What were her roles? Mafdet played various roles in Egyptian mythology. She was believed to be the goddess of justice, judgment, and execution. Therefore, she was featured in myths, stories, and legends, where she was invoked in rituals of those afflicted by the deadly venoms of snakes and scorpions. She was also worshipped as the warrior goddess of destruction, sunset, death, rebirth, and wisdom. Furthermore, she was the protector of Ra, the god of the sun, whose weakness was snake bites and scorpion stings, and he journeyed to the underworld daily. Her claws were potent weapons against snake and scorpions, even in the underworld. A mere scratch from her claw spelt the end for scorpions and snakes alike. So, her claws were symbolically made into barbs of the king's harpoon, which he used as a weapon as he sailed through the perilous waters of the underworld before reaching the afterlife. She was closely associated with the underworld as she protected the pharaoh, his burial chambers, funeral bier, and tomb. The people believed she'd hunt by night, thus earning the moniker Piercer of Darkness, to ensure the drawing of a new day. And when Osiris, the god of fertility, was broken into pieces, Mafdet protected him, all the while helping to bind the pieces together. Her depictions or images on royal tombs are associated with the symbol of Anubis, which has made people believe that Mafdet accompanied the gods as a hunter or executioner, while Anubis performed his duties as a messenger and attendant. The connection between Mafdet and the funeral bier. Before we look at the connection between Mafdet and the funeral bier, let's start by explaining what a bier is in the first place. A bier is a movable frame on which a corpse or a coffin is placed before burial. So, it was believed that Mafdet and other feline-headed gods and goddesses guarded certain halls and gates in the underworld. Therefore, they were strongly associated with the dead and the underworld. That's why many bears bore the head of a feline, lion or lioness, and the foot of the bear was often adorned with a cat's tail, so the deceased would be granted entrance and safe passage into the underworld. Mafdet as the first feline goddess. In ancient Egyptian culture, felines were one of the most revered creatures. The earlier mentions of cats in Egypt dates as far back as 4000 BCE. The Egyptians considered cats to be protectors of the land, and this notion was portrayed in their mythology. The earliest felines in Egyptian culture protected the villagers from venomous snakes. So, to show appreciation, the villagers would leave pieces of food for the cats to keep them coming to the village. and eventually led to the domestication of felines like cheetahs, lynx, lions, and wildcats in Egypt. And since the cats had such a protective nature, Egyptians portrayed them as some of the fiercest goddesses in Egyptian mythology. The felines' significant role in religion made them sacred creatures that were worshipped, and the feline deities were associated with the sun, royalty, and fertility. These deities held strong connections with Ra, the king of the gods, and the sun god. On the other hand, snakes are portrayed as villainous and deceitful creatures. Of all the gods and goddesses associated with snakes in Egyptian myth, Apophis was one that stood out. He was revered as an enemy of the high god, Ra. Apophis was associated with famine and destruction in Egypt. Hence, Mafdet was a sworn enemy of Apophis and all other gods associated with snakes. Her heroics in the House of Pharaoh and Egypt at large earned her titles such as Mistress of the House of Life, Killer of Snakes, Protector of Ra, and Protector of the Pharaoh. Therefore, Mafdet was the earliest recorded feline or cat goddess, even before goddesses like Tefnet, Wadjet, Bastet, Sekhmet, and Menhit. Subsequently, many of these ancient gods were absorbed into new gods and goddesses. The practice of creating new deities by fusing them with old gods is known as syncretism. And at the time, Thebes rose to prominence in ancient Egypt. The Theban triad of gods were so powerful politically and were a religious force, so powerful that the goddess Mut absorbed aspects of other goddesses and merged with Menhit, Wadjet, and Mafdet, who were all warrior feline goddesses. The power of Mafdet was also completely merged with Mut's. How she was worshipped. A common depiction of how Mafdet, the feline goddess, was worshipped included a temple that featured lotus flowers, as did the incense burner. Therefore, it was believed that incense offerings were made on a daily basis, and this incense played a vital part in the temple, people's daily lives, and magical rituals. Also, only priests and priestesses and royalty were allowed into the temples, while the regular Egyptians worshipped and made offerings at small shrines in their homes. The people could choose to put the statue of the goddess on the altar table or not. On this altar, the people gave offerings and prayed to the goddess while kneeling on a reed mat. The Fall of Mafdet. An ancient board game existed that connected Mafdet to not only Ra, but also the pharaohs of the First Dynasty. In the game, Mihen, who was the snake god, coiled up around to Ra. Mihen was mentioned in both the Old Kingdom and Dynasty mythology. The game also features Mafdet as the one charged with protecting the pharaoh during his quest to free Ra from the underworld. This game combined all that had been said about Mafdet in the religious aspects of Egyptian mythology. She served as the royal protector. The kings of Egypt didn't only have the title of pharaohs, they became known as the sons of the sun, and Ra became associated with the kings of Egypt. The pharaohs held a position that was upheld by the king of the gods. Although Mafdet viciously guarded the royalty of Egypt and its entirety, there was an event that saw her become an accomplice to the death of a pharaoh, ultimately ending the bloodline of the god of the sun. Osiris was a god believed to be the first pharaoh of Egypt, who was put under the careful watch of Mafdet because of his role as ruler and great-grandson of Ra. However, Osiris was gruesomely murdered by his own brother, Seth, in an unfortunate turn of events. This had meant that Mafdet had failed her most important task of all. She was banished from the land and had her power waned. The interesting twist was that she was sexually involved with Seth. Hence, she was deemed an accomplice. Regardless of her choice of sexual partner, had it been she had succeeded in her goal of protecting the pharaoh and Ra's bloodline, she wouldn't have been implicated. Mafdet was written out of history and subsequently replaced other feline goddesses. Well, it's a wrap on the tale of Mafdet. Comment below if you believe any of this is true. Do you also think she was harshly judged on the death of Osiris? Or do you feel she had something to do with the death? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye!